And yet, the Republicans in the legislature, who are overwhelmingly newbies, right? They've only been in office for a few months, are going to be told, no, you don't have a choice in this. You have to go vote for this because this is the only way we can get out of the dilemma we've created for ourselves. Well, I don't know how you get those Republicans to line up, but I guess in the end they're going to have to do it. So in the end, there's going to be a process. Wasting $10 million of public money at a time that everybody says that money is terribly short. So spending $10 million plus for a Republican-only primary in which to get a ballot you'll have to declare you're a Republican. And then I have no clue how they're going to try to control the data this time. I mean, I assume that they'll make some bizarre provision that somehow you'll declare you're a Republican, but nobody will ever know. I don't know how this will work. But somehow or other, they've got to write a bill, they've got to get it to the legislature, they've got to get it signed by the governor. Now, presumably the governor will play ball. But this whole process has to be done by about September 1 of this year. So in other words, they have the summer to get this done. It's not on anybody's radar screen at this point. And if they do that, then they need to give it immediate effect, which means they need a 2/3 vote in both houses. And that means that they'll have to buy off some Democratic votes. Now, presumably they'll be able to do that. The legislature is a sufficiently corrupt place. There are usually some Democratic votes available. But this is going to be a mess, at least potentially. And if the Democrats try to embarrass the Republicans over it, it's going to be very easy. For me, the most interesting problem is that the very people they're going to tick off will be the independents, who are, of course, the crucial vote in many legislative races. In an evenly balanced race, what matters is how well you do among the 20% who split their tickets. Well, the 20% who split their tickets and vote are exactly the people who might vote in a Republican primary and are not going to be happy at being told that Representative Smith has voted for a bill which requires that in order to vote in this primary, you declare that you're a Republican when the person involved is an independent, and discreet about what their real preferences are. So they're essentially creating a political issue that cuts pretty deep and will get a bunch of people mad who are politically important, and they're going to do this just as we get into the political season in 2012. So then that's the only way out I can think of. That's basically the solution of, well, you just stand up and walk across the wet floor and track paint. That's what you're going to do. Well, it'll probably suppress Democratic turnout because it depends on exactly how it's put together, but I think your average Democrat is going to be reluctant to sign an application for a ballot that says, I hereby request a Republican ballot, or I request a ballot for the Republican primary because I wish to participate in the nomination of Republican presidential candidate, or whatever the wording is. So it'll certainly suppress Democratic turnout. It'll also suppress independent turnout somewhat because they're reluctant, even people who regularly vote Republican, many of them like to think in their own mind that they vote for the person who is the best qualified candidate who just always happens to be a Republican. And so they don't believe that they are Republicans. They just believe that they always end up on the same side of the ballot. So a person like that might refuse to show up. In the end, there's talk about holding this entire process in late January, before the official start of the Republican nominating process. In other words, New Hampshire and Iowa are scheduled next year to be held in February. There's talk among Michigan Republicans about holding this, say, in late January, which will, of course, force the National Republican Party, first place, to sanction Michigan for being naughty, and second place, to move Iowa and New Hampshire and South Carolina and Nevada to another date. Now, if that happens, if Michigan actually, if the election held in this process by the Republicans is actually in late January, early in 2011 or 2012, if that really happens, then we might have a pretty large turnout. Let's say on the order of 600,000 or 700,000 votes, even if it has these restrictions which scare some people away. What it will mainly do is it will focus attention on Michigan and lawsuits and squabbling and fights in the legislature and more legal challenges and uncertainty about whether the election will really be held as scheduled or not, and threats by the Democrats to cross over. And it's just likely to make this yet another Michigan fiasco. Other states have established practices. And you know, established practices are kind of a good idea, because once you find something that halfway works, you can maybe fix it and make it work better. But if what you do every time you hold an election is you come up with a new harebrained scheme, that's a harebrained scheme never works very well, or it's at least likely not to work very well. And my guess is that 2012, possibly the Republicans will dodge the bullet, but this might very well go down with the Pat Robertson takeover of the Republican Party, with Jesse Jackson swamping the Democrats, with George Wallace being the Democratic candidate come out of Michigan, beating the eventual nominee, George McGovern, with the Democrats proving that John Engler's asbestos firewall was not really flame-proof. I mean, we just may be on the brink of another stupid farce. I can't imagine it, but on the other hand, I can't imagine this whole thing is so ham-handed that clearly nobody's in charge of this, because if somebody were in charge, they would be worried about this already. Okay? So if that happened, then you'd have 200,000 or 300,000 Democrats who are either motivated by a desire to nominate somebody like Rick Snyder, who is the least Republican candidate, or to do what the Republicans did in 72, which is nominate somebody absurd and damage the other party's credibility, you know, by their raid on behalf of George Wallace. So the Democrats might end up supporting, you know, I don't know who, Romney, I guess, because Romney is the least rabid maybe of the major Republican candidates. Or they might go and decide to vote for Michelle Bachmann. I just don't know. But you might very well have a decisive number of Democrats crossing over. And if the Republican vote is split among 2 or 3 major candidates, it's very easy for 200,000 Democrats to tip the balance if there are only, say, 700,000 votes cast.
Could you see the Democrats following like the Tea Party caucus and supporting a radical? You know, supporting whoever the Tea Party is supporting in the state, maybe a Bachmann or a...
Well, in the first place, the Tea Party, by its nature, isn't really a party. There's no structure and it has no command system. And so the Tea Party will support lots of people because the Tea Party, there's no qualification. In some ways, it's like, I know this is a bad metaphor. People say I've compared them to the Klan. But let me just describe the structure of the Klan for a second. In the Klan, in order to become an official member of the Klan, you just have to buy a funny white hat and a white suit and declare yourself to be a Klan member. And almost nobody in the Klan is anything other than an imperial grand kleagle, because why would you join anybody else's Klan, right? Everybody's their own president. And so there are about as many clans as there are crazy people, right? I mean, there's like one racist nut per organization. So if you actually look at the Tea Party, there were hundreds and hundreds of Tea Party organizations, none of which have any particular connections to the others, because all you have to do is get yourself a tinfoil hat and show up and have a badly spelled poster saying that Obama was born on Mars, and you know, you're a member of the Tea Party too. In fact, you are a Tea Party. So the Tea Party is easy to co-opt, or at least pieces of it, because it doesn't. There's no definition of what it is. There will be a Tea Party for Mitt Romney. There will be Tea Party supporters for Barack Obama eventually, which will look mysteriously like the Democratic Party of Oakland County when it's all over. But there will be, you know, somebody always claiming to be a Tea Party person supporting any candidate. I mean, why not?
Pretty good, yeah.
So the real question is, where will the nuts go? Not where will the official Tea Party go, but where will the people who have a couple of loose screws, who really cannot be convinced that Barack Obama was born in Hawaii, and for whom that's like a threshold issue, that if you're not as crazy as we are, we won't support you. Where will those people go? Well, I don't know. It depends on which, you know, who is the craziest person who gets this far, right? I don't know. So the Democrats might very well help out. I mean, the Democrats are going to be showing up. It's sort of like a bar fight, and you're showing up with 8 guys who are like fresh, and you could join any faction of the bar fight, right? I mean, they've been breaking chairs over each other's head and throwing beer bottles back and forth across the bar, maybe a few gunshots for a while, and you and your 8 guys show up, and you can win the bar fight, right, by joining any faction you want. And that's the situation the Democrats might be in. And that's why I believe there will be party declaration, because that is not a scenario which appeals to your average Republican insider.
Penelope wanted me to ask you, talk about your Mackinac trip this weekend.
It has nothing to do with politics.